Fred Lehrman, and I first met Marilyn in, I believe, 1981 in Calgary, Alberta. We were both working in separate hotels, different ends of town on the same weekend. And one person was actually attending both workshops, going back and forth. I don't know how he did it, but at the end of every day he said, there's somebody in town here that you have to meet. And he would say the same thing to Marilyn at the other end of town. And we had no time to do this because we were teaching from 9 till 6 every day, and it was that type of a situation. He was so insistent that at 6 a.m. on Sunday, which is extremely uncharacteristic for me, we had breakfast somewhere in Calgary, and then we went off to our separate weekends, and 3 weeks later I was down here at Mount Washington and became a co-conspirator with all of you. And the years of the 80s, the main point I wanted to say today, besides all these very, very beautiful stories and appreciations of Marilyn, is that in the last few months, when I would speak with her on the phone, she was very upbeat, very clear, and very sort of back on the horse, is the way I'd experienced it. She was very much clear what she wanted to do next, and she was insisting to me it was time to get the troops together again, and it's time to reactivate the Gallucci's, and it's time to do the power of knowing training again. And for those of you who don't know what I'm referring to, Mount Washington became really a headquarters for networking. Marilyn was the greatest networker, not only of people, but of ideas. Any idea that came through her mind was immediately hooked up with all similar ideas and organized and synthesized and taken to a new level. She was appreciative of everyone that she met because she would always home in right away on what was special about this person. And you would always feel completely recognized and validated. And then the next thing that happened was kind of the image that came to mind. It's like a pond where if you dropped the stone in the pond, it would not sink. It would start skipping in erratic patterns until it bumped into a lot of other stones. And so that was her function. She was like that pond. Anything that touched her was immediately set moving in the network. So I realized that coming down here today, I guess what she would have wanted me to talk about is to get started again and to create a context to do that. And I know I was thinking about her voluminous and rapid and extremely outstanding writing on all subjects. So there must be closets full of stuff that Marilyn wrote, which is filled with gems. It's a big job, but I think that there are so many excellent editors in this group. And very, very, you can trust. That's another thing about the Gallucci's. You learn to trust that people can do what they say they're going to do. So I feel like if there's interest to gradually start to sift through that material and categorize it and then send it off to people who are willing to sift it a second time and make selections and edits, which would then go back through some central committee, I really feel like a great archive could be brought to people which would otherwise be not noticed. She did so much that was not published that was still a very, very important thought. So I'm suggesting that. I also think that many, many years ago, I felt like when we met, we clicked in such a way that we didn't have to say very much because the slightest reference to something was immediately understood. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. And then you'd both go on thinking about new things that neither one of you had thought of before just because of what was just said. So it was a very creative, very fertile environment for discovery. And the Gallucci story is an interesting story, and I'm not going to tell it now, but we all got very we bonded as a family. Gallucci was the term Gallucci is actually there is a mafia family named the Gallucci's. It had nothing to do with that. We were a little worried about that, but it had nothing to do with that. And Mark Sarkady in Boston came up with the name somehow, and it kind of by viral pre-internet viral marketing made its way to Mount Washington.
What was it?
What was it? The Gallucci family was a sort of a self-authorized, self-created family of people who enjoyed sharing energy and enjoyed being happy in public and enjoyed encouraging others to do the same.
Like the mafia family, but without the hitmen.
And the slogan was, if you think you're Gallucci, you are one.
You think you're Gallucci, you are one, right?
Forget about
And the other aspect, I mean, later on, certain things came to the surface which none of us originally knew, including Mark. That gallo means rooster in Italian, and you can put suffixes on Italian words, so you can make them big or small or good or bad. So Gallucci would sort of mean, if you were to break it down into crude Italian, a very big rooster, whose job is like the Chanticleer of the French tradition, to go around and wake everybody up. You know, and so and it was a perfect name. And I don't know whether that was conscious in Marco or not. So I think the Gallucci family can come together again a little more overtly, because we're all here. A lot of us are here, and the ones that aren't here are also here anyway. And Marilyn had asked me and sort of assigned me to be the archivist of the Galluccis, and I was a little lazy about it. But a couple of months ago, synchronistically, I found the page which had all the Gallucci lexicon and glossary, you know, what all these terms mean. We invented a language. I'll just give you two examples of the language. You know, I know that some of you know the basic ones, but there were some strange, interesting sentences. One was "Casa tamu palav," which means you can stay in my house even if I'm not there. And then there was another phrase which was "Inash sengatsi palavushti," which means when you think you're alone, we're all around you. So the Gallucci hand, paw, claw, fin, wing book, you know, that we started talking about. The notes are there, and I'm soliciting from all of you any old documents, memories, stories that you want to jot down or photocopy or email to me, and I'll start to pull that piece of it together. And also the trainings that we did, which were always group trainings. There was no particular leader or ego involved. I mean, it's centered around Marilyn. The Power of Knowing was a floating group of trainers which changed every time. The content of the training changed every time we did it. It was done perhaps over 20 times, I think, in different cities around the country. And different people trained at each one and attended. And it was very, very valuable. And it set people going. The people who came to participate in those trainings went forth, never to return to where they thought they were going.
Be able to lift it
again.
about a week after
And because they were very empowered in a short time, and they have been given really, really essential tools to empower themselves and get their life work home.
I gotta build something
So
for this.
just in the last several months, Marilyn mentioned this, and then synchronistically, people began turning up who were asking about this training. Wasn't there something called the Power of Knowing, where they'd ask a question to me like, wouldn't it be great if somebody did something like this? I said, yeah, we did that, and we could do it again. So that's another thing I'd like to suggest, which I know she would want us to carry forward. And then was the Mad Scientist and Artist Party, which was at Ronaldo's house, which was an absolutely great event. Many people who never had any other contact except to come to that event are still talking about it. So we could start that tradition, and then Marilyn and Pete Russ and I did a weekend in Hawaii called the Knights and Wizards School. See, so these names are fanciful, but why not? So they worked very well because no one would come to such a thing if they weren't ready. So it's a technique which was near and dear to the hearts of all of us who used to sort of orbit around Mount Washington for many years. So those are the things that I think she wanted me to remind everybody of. And as far as being a hub for any of that, I'm perfectly happy, except that we have so many hubs here that it doesn't usually work like that. It works on a multi-hub system. But I'm happy to get anything you'd like me to include in any of those ideas.
And your email addresses?
The best email for me is nomadu, Nomadu, nomadu@earthlink.net.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Chris, and thank you, Lynn, and thank you all who are here today, especially for the wonderful revelations and inspiration that you bring with your memories of Marilyn. My name is Johanna Vincent Plum, and I knew Marilyn. We knew each other since all our lives. We grew up in Grand Junction, Colorado together. It was exactly the right place where Marilyn's giftedness could be fostered. And I thank especially Kim, hello Kim, hello Wayne, for your descriptions of the Grand Valley. Thank you especially Jan for telling about your remarkable family. Marilyn and I, as youngsters, were in the mission church, the American Lutheran Church, and her grandparents, I just remember, as the most regal people. My grandmother, Valor, was a force to be reckoned with. Marilyn certainly had a firm foundation. Marilyn adored her father, and if you ever heard Mike play the piano, you see where that strain of giftedness came and was fostered and went on. And it was my privilege and joy when I could talk to Mike, because as a youngster, Mike always spoke to me as an adult. That's a gift to give a youngster. We have lots of Marilyn stories. Both of us were honed in the strict school of journalism by Lillian Larson, who also attended our church, an award-winning high school journalism teacher. Marilyn in her editorship exceeded all of the qualifications, but believe me, they were strict. And we benefited from that, and I saw that blossom in Marilyn's life later on. What hasn't been mentioned here is what a fierce, loyal person Marilyn is. She made sure through all the years that when she came to Seattle, we were given tickets and attended all of these sellout at the Seattle Center, Seattle Opera House, and for the seminars we were included, and we had many conversations through the years. Marilyn was generous in an amazing way, and I brought a picture today to give to her children. And the interesting thing about this picture, my husband Paul is with me today, and I've been married 50 years. We celebrated our anniversary last June, and Marilyn was determined to be there, and her name was listed on the program as being there. She wanted so to come. What's important about this is that this is Marilyn's wedding dress, and of course Marilyn was our bridesmaid. And at the tender ages of, I think, 14 and 15, I was older than Marilyn, she wanted us to have a very important meeting one day, and it turned out that the reason for the meeting is that she wanted us to make a pact. And the pact was a promise that we would be married in the same dress. Now, at that time, I was absolutely certain I would never marry. And believe me, there were no spouses in sight for either one of us. But Marilyn planned ahead. And it was very important to her. And so I agreed with the absolute certainty that would never happen. And this is Marilyn's Italian wedding dress. It was absolutely magnificent. She was married 2 years before we were, and I kept the promise, and somehow the dress fit. And she was there and helped in every way, as did Helen, her amazing mother. So I have so many wonderful warm memories of Marilyn, and what a privilege that we could be friends for a lifetime. She tested ideas, we tested ideas, and talked and shared many times. And then one funny story, when she came to Seattle, we knew that the Aquarian Conspiracy was very big. We really didn't quite realize how big. And she stayed with us at that time, and we had a very modest little car, green Datsun. And so Marilyn was in the car, and Paul was the driver, and we drove from Seattle to Bellingham, where she was scheduled to give a talk. When we arrived in Bellingham, there were literally throngs of crowds out to greet Marilyn Ferguson. And we also always call at the time the green Datsun got a standing ovation. We were pretty much overwhelmed, but she wasn't. She was, in her own modest way, able to accept that fame and glory and handle it with such ease. And it was just a great source of joy to me to have been her lifelong friend. I always remember Blink and Breathe, and I still have my Galucci shirt. Thank you all. Thank you so much.
I'm going to be very brief. I'm Mona Monart, Mona Brooks. And I actually knew Ray first. Somewhere around 1982, Ray came with Kindred, his daughter, to take art lessons at Monart, and my whole life changed because I was going to the iGym and trade for the art lessons, and then one day he said, I want you to come home with me and meet my family. And I ended up at Marilyn's house, and Rebecca and Peter and Ruth and Anita, and there must have been 10 or 15 people there, and they were sitting there for over an hour and a half saying nothing. in a little grouping in the living room. And I found myself in a world I had never been.
That was my mother's all-time record, by the way, an hour and a half.
Oh, wait a minute. Marilyn was not in the room. The rest of us were sitting here. When Marilyn showed up, I think there was some verbiage. But I got initiated into the Galucci family that night, and I'm like, it's so interesting when I heard Peter telling his story. He lived in England, but I was functioning on the same level from 20 minutes away. I lived 20 minutes away, but I would show up on Friday afternoon and stay the whole weekend. And the thing I remember the best, I guess, is that my son, who was a teenager then, was growing up with her teenagers, and my best friend Elliot, who lived next door to me and helped me do Monart, we became a part of this whole family, and it changed all of our lives, okay, including meeting Jeremy, and again, you know, I can't write. There's no way, I can't write, I'm an artist, and Jeremy and Marilyn get on me, and before you know it, I get this book drawing, which 20 years later, the book is still on the market. And then we did another one, but it was just, and I'm talking 10 years of being at Marilyn's house, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week at least, and watching my son talk to Timothy Leary about things, and seeing John Lilly on the couch and talking to him, and it's like, it was an adventure that I just cannot tell you. And since Marilyn left Mount Washington, by the way, my house that I grew up in as a child, from 4 years old to 13 years old, was a block away from the house on Mount Washington. It was like returning home when I arrived with Ray at the house. And I love Marilyn. I will always love Marilyn. If Rebecca's right and you can really talk to her, you know, I felt her talking to me this morning, and I know she's here today. If anybody can do all that kind of stuff, it's Marilyn, and she's here with us. Thank you.
Jeremy Tart here. I've nothing really organized to say because Marilyn was of such importance in my life that it is impossible for me to speak of it in words and measure it in past sentences and paragraphs. Marilyn was beyond compare in various ways, and I love all the stories that I'm hearing, none of which I've known about, and I'm sure that there are books of stories which could be told, which would be equally unfamiliar to me, because to each one of us, she had a different vibration, but she taught all of us many of the same things. Before there was the Man from Hope and the Audacity to Hope, there was Marilyn Ferguson hoping for the whole world that it would be different. And before there was It Takes a Village and a community organizer, there was Marilyn community organizing in the most important way imaginable. I love Marilyn very deeply to this day. And although we did not spend much time together during her later years, there's no part of my life which is not affected by her every day. My company, which at some point in the 80s made various contributions to the development of many of the ideas that we all feel so excited about. My company is long gone from that kind of publishing, but it never would have been at all had it not been for Marilyn, because she not only introduced me to many of you who have written books and worked in her shadow, but she introduced me to Michael Murphy of the Esalen Institute, whose fields I also was able to take peas and carrots from. I love Marilyn. She was a great woman, and I thank all of you for being here and attending to her and feeling as you do about her and sharing these stories.
1982 and 1983, and she invited me to come out and visit. I came to two. What I want to say about Marilyn is her friendship, because although I worked with her, really the most important thing was what an extraordinary friend she was, how totally there she was for each of her friends, but I'll only speak for myself. To this very day, something happens, I want to pick up the phone. She's still there. She also gave me this wonderful surrogate family. Her children were very young when I came, and I just love them so deeply, their children. And some of my closest friends in life are the people I met and shared time with Marilyn. So I will be eternally grateful. She, next to my parents, I don't think there's anybody who had a greater impact on my life.
Well, I spent unusual times with Marilyn, drawing her bath. Who are you? Oh, who am I? I'm so sorry. Shell. And my husband David and I used to give dinners for all of you. Well, dinners or anything we could sort of cook up for after our journey time. We helped do the logistics of Power of Knowing and traveled with her across the United States. And I have to say, one of the most joyous times for me were the bathroom meetings. And that bathtub, bubble bath meetings, at any time she chose, we were there. On the floor, with notepads, as she was taking her bubble bath. Remember? Brilliance came out of those bubbles. So I never take a bath without Marilyn. So we really did have a lot of wonderful times, and what she also gave me is that sense that I could do anything that I choose to. And I have a gift of energy, working with people with energy. And she allowed me to be who I am with all of you. And also, Ray helped me a lot in that time when I was with both Marilyn and the Galucci's, and the seminar that we had in Burlingame, and all of that wonderful opening that we all did and still do. And I had a dream 3 nights ago, which is so typical. And Marilyn called me on the phone. She was staying in Ted Turner's tower. And she said, okay, we're going to go to the sushi restaurant. Come and pick me up. And I went, okay. So I went and picked her up. I'm not really sure where the tower was, but I picked her up, and she was in the car with me right here and looked at me like she always looked at me, with love and respect and acceptance. And she said, it's time to call the tribe together.
Wow.
So I guess it's time, tribe, for us to be together, even though we're not here in LA. I live in the Bay Area. I have love for all of you from Stuart and Carol, who are Heller, who is from Ohio, and sorry that they can't be here. But we've done a lot. We did a lot of postures and a lot of working out in that beautiful house. And today, before you all came, I secured the property with energy, so it would serve the highest of our being. And she's right with us forever. Thanks.